Jane, could you talk a bit more about the strategy that was deployed by the UAW and Shawn Fain? Because, I mean, it was a wonderful blend, at least from the outside, watching in, of discipline and militancy, but also strategy of rolling out different strikes and targeting them towards, if this automaker is not negotiating in good faith or we're struggling to make headway here, we're going to target this plant, etc. I found that to be pretty, I don't know, inspiring in its strategy. And I'm wondering if you think that has more salience as we're in this kind of labor renaissance here.
Oh, a labor renaissance. Woohoo! It's a permanent future. But anyway,
Hopefully.
yeah, strategy matters. I mean, that's the core to every single book I've written. Is what is it? How do you do it? What's power? How do you do strategy? I've long argued and continue to argue, and maybe get to squeeze one more book out, trying fast, on the question of power and strategy, because you can't do good strategy if you can't do good power structure analysis. Like, people just go running in a million directions all the time, and think whatever. So I was not deep in the strategy, mind you, but I think what has to be true, because I've run enough shop strikes myself, is that you have to start by targeting where's the biggest profit being made. So you have to do that analysis. 3/4 of unions don't even do it. They don't even do it. They just go running, So one is, you got to start by really having a serious economic analysis of what plants or whatever, fill in the blank, grocery stores, whatever, what plants, what chains, whatever it is, can cost the single most amount of money to give you higher value if that's the plant you close or the stores you close or the fill in the blank. Pilots in a successful airline industry, you're going to go for which is the most successful, who's got money to spend. If you get to the table, right, the employer has to have money to spend, and you have to be able to cause them a crisis. If you can't cause a crisis for the employer, you cannot win the kind of gains that I believe that they have just won. So that's one. And then, because they had just, literally, Spain had just been sworn in again in March, with a giant convention coming up around like a week later, and contract expirations coming up, right, in September at all the big three. So then it's, if we're honest, I think that I always prefer to be, then you've got an organizing team, you got financial people assessing which plants, which states, you got an organizing team assessing who can we get ready fast enough, where are they ready? And that combination of where can we hit them hard, and where are the workers ready, because we're not ready. The union is not rebuilt overnight after 40 something years of straight corruption. You don't have workers with even a muscle memory, except some of the really long timers or the fathers or mothers, yelling at the young ones, do it, go do it, go do it. There's a lot of that in the UAW, because the generation before them really does remember it. But they had to see it once. I think the John Deere strike, by the way, mattered in this progression, when the John Deere workers turned down the administration caucus, trying to shove that agreement down their face. That also inspired people, and those workers inspired people. There wasn't a lot of organizing there. That was just really pissed off people, with a lot of earlier generation people still in the plant and around, like fathers and sons all over the John Deere strike on the lines, right? And wives and sisters, in a very kind of traditional way, supporting all those workers. So I think that is real strategy. And I don't know that absolute final ways in which they did it, but it's definitely a combination of a power analysis, which is a labor market economic analysis, cost them the most. We were doing that in Vegas. We were doing that nationally in SEIU back when there was a national brain power like that, where we were, I was deputy director in 2003, and I had a project to figure out what 60 labor markets could we go to, if we wanted to organize the whole hospital industry, like where we already had the power to grow out. And then my boss said, okay, we can't fund, the head of the healthcare division at SEIU, good people back then, said, okay, we can't fund 60 organizing campaigns at that scale, give me 25. And then we got I was directing a research team that got it down to 25 labor markets. If we take big four profits in these labor markets, we're going to take the country union effectively. And then where can we get the workers ready in time? because doing a really hard strike, despite the myth, just like organizing JFK Amazon, despite the myth, which I said before that one too, it isn't self-evident how to actually organize people, but everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. But there's a lot of things that are not immediately self-evident, like a bunch of people sign up right away and you get to that 30% and you file for election with exactly the legal requirement of 30%. You built no structure inside the facility. You file for an election and good luck getting that first contract. You know what I mean? So there was real strategy. I hope it all comes out in much more detail, and I'm sure it will at some appropriate moment, but it's not usually till you've achieved everything you need in it before you start talking about it, like me with my first book. We had won all this stuff. And so laying out the power analysis and the strategy that we did everywhere I went, it was fine to put it out after those 10 years were up, my first 10 years.
I want to just sort of like walk through a little bit more slowly on that sort of no shortcut concept, because the point of getting just what you need to move the process forward is not enough, because as soon as you do that, you're going to be met with a much stronger counterforce that is going to overcome that. I mean, the system's almost designed at that point. If you have the bare minimum to qualify for a vote, you are right in the sort of the crosshairs of what the management has the ability to overcome at that point. So you've got to go in. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's the same concept. You got to go in with sort of like just as much force as you possibly can, far beyond what you need to get through the initial processes.
Yep. Or in most cases, I mean, with an A-level union buster who's on the scene from day one, you might, many workers don't get even through the first step. But the error, going back to Emma, your question, the error that I've watched so much of, too much of, is people thinking they're going to win the election and then it's going to get easier for the workers. And to Sam's point, it's actually often going to get way, way harder, because if there was a union buster on the scene and the workers slipped through and got to that next step, there's going to be an even better union buster hired to stop the first contract fight. And I've written tons about that, right? But it's really true. And I've had that unfortunate experience in almost every NLRB, National Labor Relations Board election I've ever had the pleasure of running, and every first contract that I got, when I wasn't leading a union directly anymore and I wasn't National Deputy Director at SEIU, after the phase where Stern went sort of in the wrong direction, the president at the time, I'm often called in now. I mean, I work first contract campaigns all the time, right? I'm always actively in the field and always teaching and always writing. So I think if you lose touch with the field and workers directly and how hard it is and the tools as they adjust a little bit, like Jennifer Abruzzo, the Biden's head of the labor board right now, probably the single best thing we've gotten from Biden, honestly. But even that's not magic. I mean, just because you've created better laws, there's no enforcing capacity, there's no staff in the federal government. So yeah, getting a big strategic error that's dominant even now with all the excitement is how do you go from filing minimum thresholds for those elections to beating the clock on the 480 days typically before you get a first contract? And is it a good first contract? And have you taught the workers how to govern in the process of the first contract negotiations? Because if they don't know how to govern, they weren't involved in the process of their first contract negotiations, they don't really understand what the words mean, they don't remind you to keep it simple language, you don't have to write like a damn lawyer, you can write like a human being, and keep the language simple in agreement. It helps when there's hundreds of them in the room with you negotiating, which is my approach. There's hundreds in the room every time I go to the table. And it can really be a war. And I'll just give one example. In Einstein, the campaign I wrote about in the new book, which is in Philadelphia. Sorry, it's a big nonprofit hospital in Philadelphia, biggest emergency department, downtown, special, services, all poor people, Medicaid, Medicare, all of it. So it's just a huge hospital in the fifth largest city in the country. And they did everything that was done to Amazon. Like when I was first meeting with some of the Amazon folks way back right after the victory at JFK. They informally called for some help. That was like May, a month after the win. And they were like, yeah, but this is so different because they filed charges against the labor board too to get us thrown out of this region where we all live. And we had to go to Arizona. And I was like, right, that's not a new strategy on the part of the boss at all. You're just so young, like they don't know.
Right.
Which is why getting people involved who actually know and can coach you and teach you so that you know enough to then go do it on your own is pretty crucial. At Einstein, they did everything. Same thing. The boss sued the labor board in Philadelphia. They sued the union for stealing votes in the election. I mean, they sued us for everything, multiple targets in the lawsuits. And we won that first contract 8 months later. 8, not 480 days. And that's pretty much.
Be clear. I mean, 8 months is very quick.
Record.
That time between being unionized and getting that contract. And to that point, I mean, you bring up Abruzzo, and I do want to get to just sort of like a little bit more of an assessment of what the UAW, to the extent that we know. But since you brought up Abruzzo, that element that the National Labor Relations Board recently said that we will now consider the potential of from that period of unionization to first contract. If you're not negotiating in good faith, management, we will now consider that an unfair labor practice, in which case, and they're talking about this, I guess, at this point, of if we assess that is an unfair labor practice in that you're scheduling meetings and not showing up, or you're not being serious about it or whatever, that will then go to arbitration. That's sort of because the National Labor Relations Board has made a couple of moves that, close to card check, sort of like a card check light at this point. But that to me seems to be the golden chalice, if you will, where once they have helped the unionization, but it seems like the anti-union industry that has sort of like realized, okay, we're moving to our next redoubt, which is we're just going to inhibit the actual having of a contract. And in many instances, because of the nature of the turnover in our business or whatnot, we can avoid actually, we can break the union down the road, even after it's elected. And that to me seems to be sort of like the golden chalice, right? If you get to the National Labor Relations Board saying, we're going to mediate a contract. We're going to send you to mediation or whatever it is.
Yes. A couple things though. One, it was always the ULP. It was always called an unfair labor practice charge if either party could be accused successfully of stalling, not bargaining in good faith. That's always been a ULP my whole lifetime as an organizer and negotiator. The difference is there's a threat now to force them into an arbitration-like situation. Okay. But then there's a lot of other good things that Abruzzo's done, honestly, and I've written several things about it recently. But to focus in on this one for a minute, for those of us trained in the methods that I was trained in and I've been teaching my whole life, which were methods from the 30s, dragged straight into the new century. One of several things. There were so many axioms I was given as a young organizer. And when I began negotiating, my mentors, who were incredible negotiating mentors, said, McAlevey, always just that. There's no Jane in the labor movement. McAlevey with the finger pointed at you. Don't ever let them put you into mediation. Don't ever let them put you into an arbitration. Workers need to win their contract across the table, face to face, and extract the max from the boss. The boss can't go off and hide behind some arbitration or mediation process that immediately cuts out the workers. So I was trained that way, and I think many people were. And if you're doing your work correctly in terms of really organizing, recruiting the real leaders, not charismatic people, all the methods that we believe and teach and that lead consistently to success, honestly, through all the through all the bad times of like the labor movement got bad when I was coming of age, you know what I mean? So coming up at the worst of the labor movement and getting to this point is such a pleasure. But if I look back, I don't think in any first contract fight the workers ever went past 1 year, ever. Like, you say to the workers, you just took the, like the way you were framing it, you just took the first step, and it's going to get hella harder right now. So there's no time to take a nap. Here's what has to happen tomorrow. If you wanna, you can just say win a contract. If you and your coworkers want to win the fundamental changes and make the improvements that you just fought to have the right to do, it's time to step it up here, people, because they're going to come at it hard. And you be honest and you give them the statistics. You've even done that before the election, and so that they're ready for the fact that there's much more work coming. And the reason with the first book, Raising Expectations, which was all the stories, there's no contract that went past 1 year in my first 10 years in the whole labor movement. It's just like, I got taught well, I followed discipline and methods well, we win. It was shocking to me that we did it in 8 months in Philadelphia, because we didn't even get them to drop the legal charges for 5 months. So we didn't even get to negotiations till, I believe, August 17th off the top of my head in 2016.